We have so many things to cover this morning. Let's see. Okay. So you got your forms that I handed out. I started filling mine out. I'm not done yet. I have 3 songs and 1 psalm, but I haven't picked out 2 more psalms yet. So I still got some homework to do. But I'm working on it. Does anybody need another form or anything like that? Yeah, I know. I just started thinking. You know how you randomly think, "Oh, yeah, I really like that song, so I'm going to write it down." That's what happened because I was thinking about this, and I was like, "I'm not going to say what my song is. I'll have to tell you guys later. I'm saving it up till I got it all filled out." But kind of thought of what are my favorite songs and all that, and I picked some specific ones that I really like. But the Psalms I don't know yet. I'm still working on that. Also, I put together just a 1-page summary of the ABA meetings that's in the back. So if anybody wants that, you can kind of see. And if you have any more questions or want any more information, I can definitely provide that. This is all kind of excerpts from information that they handed out, and just let me know whatever you think about that. And then I'm going to put that over here so I don't mess it up with my notes. So we are studying in Psalms, and just to go back and remember what that's about. So the entire collection of Psalms is called Praises in the Hebrew text, and the rabbis have all often called it the Book of Praises. And it's Israel's God-breathed hymn book, if you look at 2 Timothy 3:16. And it's an example of how hymns should be written for our present times. And just like in David's time, the ones that he wrote, they don't point to David, they point to God. And so if you wonder if a song you hear on the radio or whatever it is, it might be something that came out yesterday or something that's an old one, whatever it is, if you say, "Hey, is that scriptural?" one of the first things you can think of is, does it point to God? And if it doesn't, then it isn't. And so there's other things you can think about too, but that's the big one. How many Psalms are there? Anybody remember about how many there are? 150. Yep, that's exactly right. So we have a long way to go. It's 2 quarters. We are doing 25 to 30. So we are just scratching the surface of this so far. David wrote at least 73 of them. The sons of Korah, which were Levites, wrote 10. Asaph, who was a Levite singer in David's court, wrote 12. Solomon wrote at least 1. Moses wrote at least 1. Heman, who was also a Levite, wrote some. Ethan was the one who was involved in bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, and he wrote 1, and then there's 50 that are anonymous. We don't know exactly who wrote it. But Ezra is thought to be the one that kind of pulled them all together into one thing. And how many years of history between the oldest and the newest hymn? Anybody remember that? Yeah, it's about 1,000, so it's a lot. Yep, okay. So today we are in Psalms 25 through 30. And the lesson focus is on 29. Is that right? Okay, I'm looking at my notes and I was like, this doesn't look right. If I brought the wrong notes, I was going to be really unhappy. I brought the right notes. Okay, so let's go ahead and do 25 and 26. And then I think we may do 29 and then come back to the other ones because we got to make sure we cover 29 today. Okay. Would somebody like to read Psalm 25? Thank you, Sister Doris. So what is this psalm about? Some of the psalms are about getting ready for battle, what happens right after the battle. What about this one? Mm-hmm. So David had a huge responsibility as the king of Israel. He wasn't just responsible for himself and for any sins that he did or any commands that he issued to anyone. He was responsible for the whole country. And being God's chosen people and God's anointed, he had a much greater responsibility to follow the Lord. And there was much more expected from him because of that. And he's very mindful of that. And then we see that here in this psalm, that he is, it doesn't sound like he's a king when he's saying this, does it? It just sounds like he's another person that's a follower of God looking for help. And so the theme of this one is he's asking the Lord to show me your ways. And it's really about praise, but it's also David meditating and wanting to get closer to the Lord so that he for sure will follow his path. And so if you look in verse 4, where he says, show me, it's really the idea of making sure that David has the proper teaching so he knows what he should be doing. And we saw from history, recent history that we read about, when they didn't transport the Ark of the Covenant properly, what happened in that case? Right. Somebody died because they touched it. Was Uzziah? I think it was Uzziah. Uzzah. Okay. So, okay. So I was close anyway. But he died because he touched it because they did it improperly. So the first thing is, he's asking the Lord to show him, help me understand what it is that I should be doing, how I should be doing it. And then in verse 4, he says, teach me And this has the idea of not just getting proper instruction. Sometimes we know exactly the right thing to do, but we don't do it. We've studied it. We know it. We know exactly what God expects us to do, but we don't do it. That's the sinner part of us. And so what David is saying here is, for those situations, God, please help me, push me in the right direction. Don't just watch me make mistakes or watch me do it wrong, which happens, but please help me by encourage me to go in the right direction. And what does that represent? Or how does that happen? God has lots of different ways He can help us. Sometimes He puts up a roadblock to keep us from going in the wrong direction. Sometimes He makes us think about something. Sometimes somebody says something. I can't even say how many times somebody said something to me and I was like, how did you know what I was thinking? And then you realize God knows what we're thinking, and God has all the ways you can think of, plus many more on the ways that He can speak with us, can influence us, can help us to do the right things. And when we ask for His help, it seems like the Lord is inclined to do that. Especially when you're king of Israel and you appeal to the Lord and say, please forgive me of my sins and please help me to do things the right way. That's what the Lord wants us to do. The Lord wants us to pray and ask for His help, wants us to ask every single day for His help on how we should do things, rather than just relying on what we think is the right way to do something. In verse 5, it talks about leading me, and this writer says that he thinks it paints a picture of stringing a bow, that David wanted the Lord to keep him on the straight and narrow path. And when you shoot an arrow, if you strung the bow correctly and you made the arrow correctly, then the arrow is going to go straight. If you didn't do it correctly, which I've done that before, it goes kind of crazy. And it makes a lot of noise too. But David is asking for help. Now a third different way, he's asking for the Lord's help to keep him on the right path. And so here he's praising the Lord at the same time. He's opening himself up and saying, please show me how I should do things. How many times do we do that? How many times do we think about something challenging or something in front of us? I've been thinking about this a lot lately for some reason. We went to one of those gas stations you go to on a trip, and they got stuff in there, and one of the things they had was like a little tiny miniature Rubik's Cube. It's like about this big, and I have it in my truck. I have not figured out how to do that. And I don't want to read how to do it because I want to figure it out by myself, but it's going to take a long time to do it. And so I still haven't figured it out. And I think in a situation like that where you don't know what to do, the Lord says, that's why I'm here. Come to me and ask me. Ask me for my help. Ask me for how you should do it. Ask me to provide wise counselors for you and to show you the word in the Bible in a way that will help instruct you or whatever. Don't rely on yourself to figure things out. When people in the Bible relied on themselves to figure things out, it didn't go very well. We saw lots of examples of that. And I think my life is a good example of that too. When I don't do things the right way, it kind of leads to a big mess. And so leaning on the Lord and asking the Lord for help, not just on how we do things, but even the things we do in the first place, the Lord is there to help us when we ask for it. In verse 6, he's talking about, remember, O Lord, thy tender mercies and thy loving kindness, for they have been ever of old. Remember not the sins of my youth, nor my transgressions. So he's asking for the Lord to forget about all those mistakes that he made and have mercy on him. In verse 8, good and upright is the Lord, therefore he will teach sinners in the way. And he's talking about himself as a sinner in this case. The meek will he guide in judgment, and the meek will he teach his way. For you to be able to learn something, the first thing you have to do is listen. You have to listen. You can't learn anything. I've seen so many different things that I thought, oh yeah, I know how to do that, or whatever. I don't really know how to do it. And then there's some obvious things that I've done before, and I think, I know how to do this. And then I choose to listen, and I learned something. I learned something I didn't know. I learned something that helps me fix a problem I've had for a long time that I haven't been able to figure out. So for us to be able to learn, we have to be meek. We have to put the Lord first. We have to trust in the Lord, and we have to allow Him to teach us. So when we read the Bible, it should be personal to us. We should think of the examples in our life that it applies to, just like it applied to Israel and so many others, the Gentiles. It applies to us also. And we know better than anybody what our situation is. And if we can see our situation mirrored by the people that we're reading about in the Bible, then we're one step closer to understanding what the Lord wants us to do, and the outcome if we don't do what the Lord wants us to do. Verse 12, what man is he that feareth the Lord? Him shall he teach in the way that he shall choose. It's amazing to me how many people don't fear the Lord. When you look at, you don't have to go very far. You can go anywhere in any direction. You can watch TV pretty much, and within less than a minute, you can find people that look like they're pretty clearly believe that they're the voice of authority and the voice of knowledge, and they're not relying on the Lord. They're not relying on anything else. They're pretty much amazed with themselves. You can see that pretty much everywhere. People that don't give the Lord the credit for the blessings that they've received. But when we fear the Lord and we follow His teachings, in verse 13, his soul shall dwell at ease, and his seed shall inherit the earth. The secret of the Lord is with them that fear Him, and He will show them His covenant. So what was unique about David and the covenant that the Lord made with him? So in the background was David wanted to build the house for the Lord. He had a burden on his heart for that. And the Lord said, yeah, that's not going to happen. But I will build a house for you that'll live forever. And that's how the house is his lineage will continue forever. And so He blessed him far beyond he could ever imagine and made a promise to David. Mine eyes are ever toward the Lord, for He shall pluck my feet out of the net. How many times do we get our feet caught in a net? Does that happen? We get ourselves tangled up in a situation. We think, how did I get myself into this mess? So you make a bad decision, which leads to another bad decision, leads to another thing, and then next thing you know, what on earth have I got myself into with all of this? And if you're not thinking about the Lord at the beginning of all that stuff, you definitely are thinking about Him when you're in the middle of it, on how to help you get through it. Turn thee unto me, and have mercy upon me, for I am desolate and afflicted. The troubles of my heart are enlarged. O bring thou me out of my distresses. Look upon my afflictions and my pain, and forgive all my sins. Consider mine enemies, for they are many, and they hate me with cruel hatred. And there are so many times that David talks about his enemies. He talks about his enemies all the time. He asks the Lord to put stumbling blocks in front of them, to keep them from being successful, to keep them from killing him, to keep them from being victorious. He does that all the time. And I have to admit, when I pray about things, I usually don't pray for enemies to have obstacles. I don't pray that way. But if we pray for those that are ungodly to have obstacles and barriers, I think that's along the lines of what David is saying here. Oh, keep my soul and deliver me. Let me not be ashamed, for I will put my trust in thee. Let integrity and uprightness preserve me, for I wait on thee. Redeem Israel, God, out of all his troubles. So this is a song. So this is not just the words as we read it. I didn't sing it because I wouldn't know exactly how to sing it. But I think the message is pretty clear here that David is meditating. He's once again trusting in the Lord, and this is a song. So this is not meant to be David to the Lord alone. This is David singing this song for everyone to see his obedience to the Lord. It's his testimony, part of his testimony, that he is sharing not just with the Hebrews. I'm sure the Hebrews all heard it, but there are those beyond the Hebrews that heard him doing this. And so this is another case where David is following the Lord. He's doing it in a very public way. He's doing it in a way that shows his obedience and subservience to the Lord. And the fact that we're reading about it must mean the Lord wants us to be encouraged by it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a good point, Brother Mike. Otherwise, we're just wandering around, making mistakes all the time, asking for forgiveness, and then going back to our wandering around in the next moment and doing the same thing all over again. So, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, here David is opening himself up and say, please help me to understand. Yeah, it's great testimony. So, actually, I'm going to suggest that we go ahead and jump to 29, which is the focus from the quarterly, and we'll come back to the other ones. 29 is the focus of the writer. So we'll jump to that one, and then we'll go back to the other one. Brother Philip Miller, since I know who he is now. And if you do the podcast, he'll read to you. So if you wanted to read the lesson to you, all you got to do is get the podcast, which I listen to on the way to work, just to help me out with it. But so Psalm 29 is a little bit different. Would somebody like to read this one? Thank you, Brother Homer. So what's this one all about? Mm-hmm. Yeah, his power and might is way beyond what we can imagine. Brother Jim said about the Lord, because it says 18 times, it says, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this one, a couple of different writers suggested that David maybe wrote this while he was looking at a strong thunderstorm, or even, I guess, what we would call a tornado or something along those lines. When he was watching it, where you could see it from afar off, before it came to where you were, and you could see the power of it. If you've ever been to Kansas, which is about as flat as it can be, you can see a storm probably 20 miles away or more, easily, and you can see whether it's coming your direction or going north, south, whatever, pretty easily. If you're around here, depending on where you are, you can see a storm coming off pretty far away. But David is talking about the power of the Lord as witnessed by watching a storm. And the voice of the Lord, he's almost likening the voice of the Lord to the thunder that you hear when you have a thunderstorm. So it kind of made me think back to a time whenever I've seen a rainstorm somewhere, and by coincidence I was reading this psalm, and the very same day I was driving home from work, and it was a thunderstorm. And so I was much more focused on what was happening than I normally am, and there was a lot of lightning. And if you think about when you're a little kid and you're trying to draw a straight line without a ruler, and you usually do it pretty slow, so your line looks a lot like this when you're drawing it. If you imagine lighting that up in the sky as a thunderbolt, that's pretty much what I was seeing when I was driving home. There's probably, 25 or 30 thunderbolts that I was watching on the way home, and the thunder that went with it. And man has not been able to duplicate that. Isn't that crazy? All the stuff that man has been able to do technology-wise and everything else has not been able to duplicate a thunderstorm. I mean, to me, just the fact that we drove here to church in a car that has all the capabilities it has, yet we can't even come close to duplicating the power that the Lord shows in a thunderstorm. And I don't know, what do you all think about that when you see a thunderstorm? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Something that we see that we may not connect it to God necessarily every single time. And if you look in the first verses here in 29, give unto the Lord, O ye mighty, give unto the Lord glory and strength. Give unto the Lord the glory due his name, unto his name. Worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness. And then it continues. So he's talking here O ye mighty, he's talking about the other rulers and the people on the earth, more or less saying, give the Lord the credit that he's due. Don't take credit for everything the Lord has done. You may be in a high-level position, whatever, but it's because the Lord put you there. The Lord is the reason you're there in the first place. And in the case of the storm, recognize that God is greater than all of us and give him the praise that he deserves. And so I don't know how many of you ever had a chance to be around rulers, whether they're governor, president, or prime minister, or whatever. I've been able to do a little bit of that. Those people usually don't like anybody telling them anything. You need to do this. That is not very well received usually. And so here we have David 3 times in a row telling these rulers, here's what you need to do. And I'm expecting that many of them are not going to receive it favorably or the way that David had intended it, which is for them to have a realization that God is great and God is overall, and not just the God that somebody might worship, but the one true God. So they had idols and they had gods and goddesses that they worshiped. They were responsible for different pieces of things in their societies. But the God that the Hebrews worship is the one true God, and that's what he's talking about there. Have you ever been on the water when a storm came up? Yeah? So what is that like? So all the turbulence and the thunder and the storm that's in the sky, it's kind of mirrored on the water too, isn't it? Yeah. Was it scary? Yeah. And powerless too, right? Yeah, you don't have the ability to do anything. If you're in the boat that flips over, it's going to flip over. There's nothing you're going to do about it. It made me think back to the aircraft carrier. I have to find a way to link things to the aircraft carrier once in a while. And so in this case, when they're out to sea, they can have 40-foot swells that actually come up over the bow of the ship. And so I don't know if you know this or not, but the aircraft that they have on the deck are actually chained down with, I don't even know how many chains. It could be a dozen chains, chaining it down to the top of it so they don't get swept away, blown off, or washed off, or whatever. And that's a pretty normal thing for them to do. Sometimes they say that when the water comes over the bow of the ship, that it can go down the full length of the deck, which is 1,092 feet long, or over 300 yards of a wave coming across the deck on the top of the ship. And so that's one of the biggest ships out there. So if you're the small ship in that same storm, you're probably not going to be as fortunate of making it through as they are. So the Lord's power is so far beyond our ability to understand. And when we see examples of all these, it's really important for us to recognize and acknowledge that that's where it comes from. That's the power of the Lord. And there's so many people watching us to see what we say and think. I think about when I was a small kid watching all of this stuff and how much I relied on my parents and grandparents and other people to tell me what that was all about. And I relied on that, what they told me. And so we have ability to impact people that sometimes we don't understand. But when we tell people our beliefs and where the power comes from, it really is a testimony to the Lord. Another one here is the cedars of Lebanon. And I have to confess, I didn't know anything at all about the cedars of Lebanon. It talks about this in verse 5. The voice of the Lord breaketh the cedars, yea, The Lord breaketh the cedars of Lebanon. He maketh them also to skip like a calf, Lebanon and Syrian like a young unicorn. And so, something about the cedars of Lebanon, can't hardly say it. The cedars of Lebanon is that they are pretty rare. They make few pine cones compared to other trees. They have lower seed germination rates than any other species, and their seedlings grow slowly. Contrary to the cedar that we see, the wood is pretty hard, and it's extremely durable and retains a cedar fragrance for many years. They're known for their resistance to decay and their longevity. I always say that wrong. Spell checker corrected me when I put in my notes, and I said it anyway, the wrong way. But they can grow as tall as 120 feet high, the cedars of Lebanon. So that's pretty tall. And if you remember, when David was collecting the materials for Solomon to build the temple, that was one of the places he got it from, the cedars of Lebanon. So some of the best materials on the earth. And what David is explaining here, those cedars of Lebanon is just like a matchstick. It's like nothing. When we had that storm just up the hill, do you all remember when that happened? All the trees that got blown down, and if you're at camp, you don't have to remember because it just happened last week. But when you see the power of what happens there, and you see the green sky, and you say, wow, I've seen green on the ground, but not green in the sky. That can't be good. And sure enough, the aftermath of that was really bad here and at the airport and other places close by. And the power of God was shown in all of that. And it just wrecked a lot of different things and just reminded us, we may think we're in charge, but we're not in charge of anything. The Lord's in charge of everything. And so that's just one single display of his power. And that's what David is looking at here. The voice of the Lord divideth the flames of fire. So he talks about the fires too. How many fires have we seen in California and other places that are caused by lightning? Where you have a really dry situation and lightning strikes a tree, catches on fire, and then next thing you know, the whole forest is on fire. Another one of the writers mentioned here, if you watch a blacksmith when they're doing what they do, or they heat up metal till it turns red and they start hammering it into shape, well, one of the things that happens is a lot of things start flying off of that are the bright pieces of metal that come off, and they kind of go all over the place in every direction. So they were reminding us about that too. And the voice of the Lord goes everywhere. So it's not just in the city. It's out in the wilderness. It's everywhere. And what is that saying? If a tree falls in the forest but nobody's around, does it make a sound? Of course. Just because we're not there to hear it, it doesn't mean anything. The Lord doesn't need us. Right. There's a lot of other life, exactly. So even the wilderness, even the animals, and one of the examples they brought up was the example of a lion's roar. And I haven't been out to Africa or any place like that where there's lions in the wilderness. You can watch on YouTube where people are driving around a little Jeep and there's like, oh, look at that lion over there. They're a lot braver than I am. I don't think I want to be 20, 30, 40 feet away from a lion that's living in their own environment, looking at me saying, well, look at that idiot over there. So I've made a lot of mistakes, but that's one mistake I hadn't made. Yeah, Meals on Wheels, exactly. So, but it talked about the voice of the lion or the lioness, and when you hear that roar, you can imagine that in that area, wherever that lion is, every single thing noticed that happened. Every animal that was around, especially if you're a deer or giraffe or anything, noticed that, yeah, there's a lion around here that sounds like it's hungry, and that's not a good thing. Or if you're swimming, maybe it's a shark, You know, I don't think a shark has like a sound that I've heard of. Maybe crunching bones or something. I don't know. I don't really know what other sound that they make, but they're just as dangerous. And you ever notice when a shark is around, pretty much all the other fish kind of go the other way. They all pretty much disappear. And so David is talking about the power of the Lord here. Doesn't go unnoticed. Whether man gives God the credit or not is another thing. They say, oh, that's Mother Nature. Oh, that's Mother Earth, or that's whatever. That's not what it is. It's God. It's God's power. We know it's God's power. And it kind of made me think, I know it's God's power, but do I tell people that? When it's happening, do I tell people that? And I don't think I do, which is a good thing for me to remember to do when those situations happen. Okay, and then verse 11, or 10 actually, the Lord sitteth upon the flood, yea, the Lord sitteth king forever. So the Lord is all powerful, even over the flood that flooded the entire earth. In verse 11, the Lord will give strength unto his people. The Lord will bless his people with peace. So he's trying to convey the idea here. If the Lord has this kind of power, and we're serving the Lord, and our enemies are against the Lord, how great is that for us? That the Lord is taking care of us and not our enemies. And so sometimes we may take that for granted, that the Lord's taking care of things, frustrating our enemies, keeping bad things from happening to us, even though somebody else has bad intentions. There's a lot of times, and I can't remember specific things, but we had narrow misses on this or that or the other thing, and like, oh, that almost happened. Do we give God the credit for that? So God was the one that blessed us. There's lots of things the Lord blessed us with that we just don't necessarily give him the credit. Okay. Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just like he spoke life into existence, he's in control. He's in control of everything. Mm-hmm. 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 And give him the credit, right? Right. Point ourselves toward God and point other people toward God also. And what Brother Homer was talking about, when you're under conviction, I pray for people that are not saved, people in my life that are not saved, and I pray that they're under conviction. And I also pray that the Lord will draw them closer to him. And it's not just a one direction thing, but if we intercede for someone that's not saved and we pray and pray over it, I really do believe that God hears our prayers. And God, I definitely know, blesses our prayers. And there's so many examples of things we've prayed about or for. I can't even say how many that the Lord's blessed us. We didn't deserve the blessing, but the Lord gave it to us. And so for somebody that needs to be saved, that's most definitely a special prayer. For somebody that needs to accept Jesus Christ as their Savior, they need to turn their life around. They need to think about things a completely different way than they do now. Okay, so we have 4 more. No, there's a lot more. Hopefully you get a chance to read all this in the time that you have outside of the class. And I'm still searching. I've got the one psalm that I picked, but there's 2 more that I haven't picked yet. So if you haven't had a chance to pick your choices, please pick your choices. If you need forms, right where I sit, right in front of there, under the chair in front of me, I got blank forms. So if you happen to lose your form, feel free to grab one or whatever. You don't have to turn it in, but you might be asked some questions about it. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a correlation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that all the time. In fact, I'm not giving myself away just yet, but there was a verse that kind of been rattling around in my head for a long time. It made me think about a song from way back when, and I actually found it this last week. So that's my 3rd song on my list of 3 songs. But I'll pick another time to tell you the story about that. Also, we are out of town next week. We're going down to visit Matthew and Dina and Violet and Willa and all that down in Atlanta. And so we won't be around. Brother Mike will be teaching the class, and you guys get a break. Where are you going? Family reunion. Well, that sounds pretty exciting. Yeah? Good. Good stuff. All right.